Hello, good evening and welcome to the Gooner Ramble and AFTV podcast. On tonight's edition of Behind Enemy Lines, where we get the inside track on Arsenal's next opponents, we'll be talking to an avid Fulham fan, the editor of the Hammy End and a Labour councillor, Dan Crawford. Still chipper from seeing off Norwich City in the FA Cup last night and having a bit of a snicker at Fat Sam Adedici, crying about Rennie Moulinson, instantly chatting about his shopping habits at Morrison's and Ravel's. Joining me on the pod, we have regular panellists Callum and Judd. Good evening, fellas.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good. And without further ado, let me introduce you to our Fulham guest, Dan Crawford. Good evening, Dan. How are you, sir?
Hi, Charles. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Great stuff. Thanks for coming on. All right, so let's get right into it. We're playing you guys on Saturday, coming to the Emirates on Saturday. How have you seen your season so far, and how do you think it's progressed, or otherwise, since you last met us?
It's regressed horribly. And how have I seen my season? Largely with my hands covering my eyes, Charles. It's been a terrible experience. And we don't really know what to expect from Fulham anymore. You know, we used to be fairly disciplined defensively, played some nice football and, quite pleasing on the eye, strong at home and couldn't win away. And actually our best performances have been away from home this season, and we've sort of crumbled at the cottage, which has been really disappointing. Obviously we've had a managerial change fairly recently. Indeed, the favourite song of the Fulham faithful at the moment is We've Got Three Managers, in homage to Ray Wilkins, who I'm not a particular fan of, and Alan Curbishley, who obviously come in to assist René Moulinstein. And we're desperately hoping that it picks up, because it's been dire, really, really bad.
Okay. Can you just explain that setup that you just mentioned, the three-man setup? I mean, how is that expected to be like a technical director, a director of football, and the head coach? I mean, is that continental, or what kind of style is that?
I think it's whatever the hell works to try and get us out of this mess we've dragged ourselves into. So Moulinstein was obviously at the club for a couple of weeks before he supplanted Martin Jol, and I don't think anyone disagrees that Jol had to go. When he did, he presided over a shambolic performance at West Ham, not to mention some truly awful displays before that. So Moulinstein became the head coach. And I think quite honestly, he looked around and said to Alistair McIntosh, who's the chief executive, that he might need a bit of assistance. So the first one they brought in was Alan Curbishley, which is a bit odd. I mean, I like that we're, helping out the unemployed, which is very nice. But Curbishley is termed technical director. What that means exactly is still to be realised. It means sitting in a nice Fulham coat next to the board in the stand, from what I've seen. And Ray Wilkins, who's, has a slightly checkered history of Fulham, being such an ardent Chelsea man, of course, and having previously been sacked by Fulham and then tried to sue Fulham for constructive dismissal. He came in as one of Moulinstein's coaching assistants, and given that Wilkins' time at the helm at Fulham was characterised by the most soporific sideways passing football, we weren't necessarily enamoured with that appointment.
Right. Gosh. Okay. So relegation-wise, I mean, looking at the table, was it kind of 6 points between the bottom 11, is it?
I think we saw it, 7 between Hull and Southampton, who are in 10th and 9th respectively, and then it's 6 points between Hull and Palace in 20th, so it's pretty close.
So it's a real tight-knit kind of group down there, Dan. Do you see yourselves putting clean now that you've got René Moulinstein on board and at the helm? I mean, he was arguably the brains behind Alex Ferguson's success at Man United. Do you see him breathing new life into Fulham? Is there enough time?
I hope there's enough time, because we've still got plenty of games left, and I was really encouraged by the start he'd made until we gave Sunderland a very significant helping hand on Saturday and allowed Adam Johnson to score a hat-trick, which, in slightly harsher climates might be punishable by a firing squad. And Meulensteen, I like him as a character. I think he's obviously a very good coach, but we still look incredibly fragile at the back, and that's a real worry. Ironically, getting battered by Sunderland didn't matter a jot in terms of our league position at the weekend. We do have a ridiculous goal difference, so I think staying up on goal difference as we did the last time we got out of this kind of trouble is well beyond us now. You've just got to hope that we can put a little run together, and the fixtures in general in the real run in look pretty kind, but you can't look too far ahead. And it's got to be up to us, really. We've got to try and find a way of playing that's going to make us tougher to beat. And I think Brede Hangeland came back last night. He's been out for 3 months with an injury, and they paired him with a young centre back called Dan Burn last night, who was excellent, only making his second appearance for the first team in our FA Cup replay last night. And I'll be tempted to suggest that as the way forward, because they kept a clean sheet, and that's the first one of those we've had in about 6 weeks. So if we can continue doing that'd be excellent, but it's obviously a different kettle of fish coming up against you guys on Saturday.
Yeah. Just looking at a few of the players that were there recently that have moved on. I mean, Chris Smalling was there briefly before he went to move. We was rumoured to be in for him, but he went to Man United. You got 10 million or so from him. Moussa Dembele, Clint Dempsey. Has he returned to the club on loan now?
Dempsey's come back, for a sort of get me fit before the World Cup loan.
Yeah. And Mark Schwartz also. You've had and now Brian Ruiz has gone on loan to PSV. You've had you've had your fair share of really good players that have come through the club. And I just wanted to know, did it get to a point with Al Fayed where he just couldn't prop up the club anymore, and he needed to sell off some of the crown jewels, and eventually he sold to, is it Shahid Khan? Is that his name?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Al Fayed, to be honest, had been looking to sell the club for quite some time, and we've had about 3 seasons now of minimal investment in the playing side. And actually, nobody begrudges Al Fayed for. And let's mention he did a terrific deal. We sold the club for about £160 million to Shahid Khan at the start of the summer, which is remarkable. Given Fulham's stature. But the frustrating thing really is, you'll remember a couple of years ago we reached a European final, which was a dream ride, and you just wonder what might have happened if we were able to build on that rather than tread water slightly with a number of managerial changes. And gradually we've lost a number of established players, and actually the first team squad's only got significantly older since then, by virtue of sort of shopping at Woolworths rather than going to Harrods, if you like. And it's been really disappointing. I think the key one, really, you mentioned Dembele, but we lost Dembele, Dempsey and Danny Murphy in the same summer. And
S2 as well, isn't it?
Yes.
It was quite stalwart.
And that was catastrophic, really, because we've been looking for midfield players ever since, and whatever we tried to do hasn't really worked. You'd say that January was a big month for us in terms of bringing in some new players, but we're halfway through and we've only managed 1 loan so far.
Right. What has been the fan reaction to Shahid Khan? I mean, I remember when he came in the first day and Al Fayed had warned him, not to not to do this and not to do that. But then I think as soon as he'd gone, no sooner had he gone, had Shaheen Khan taken down the Michael Jackson statue. And I heard a stat that you've lost 12 of 16 games since you've taken down the statue. Is there any sort of superstitious relevance to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're all quite pleased when it went, but actually it's been a lot more mobile than our central midfield. Khan is an interesting one to read. He doesn't say an awful lot. He's obviously known really in sporting terms for his American football franchise, and we don't really know how much he knows about football. The key man for Fulham is actually the chief executive, Alistair McIntosh. He's very highly regarded. He was Manchester City's chief executive for a while, and he's been really good. But yeah, the fan reaction is fine, but I think we will judge him based on what the club ends up doing. We'd like to think there's a master plan there. But it's difficult to see one at the moment. I don't think he would have banked on taking charge of a club that was plummeting towards the Championship, because I don't think it's easy to come back from relegation, certainly for Fulham. It would be catastrophic. So it's a bit early to say, but the fact that he hasn't sort of got rid of the people behind the scenes and brought in his own people suggests he's prepared to see how things go and trust in some of the key faces we've got behind the scenes.
Okay. So no one sort of knows what Shahid Khan's real vision is at the moment. Do you think if you do, I mean, I don't want to ask this question for the sake of your fans, but if you do go down, do you think he's in there for the long haul?
I'd like to think so, but relegation sharpens the mind a little bit. I think he'd find it very difficult to sell the club should we go down. And I think at the moment they're probably hoping to starve that off just a little bit on his vision. He's talked a lot about being self-sustainable, and that was one of the massive achievements of the Al Fayed regime, is that by the end we were posting profits in our accounts, and quite considerable profits at that, when we were largely indebted to the benefactor for getting us up through most of the leagues and then securing our place in the Premier League. That side of the story is really impressive. And building on that would be really good. The club have committed to staying at Craven Cottage, which is obviously massively important to the fans. So we'll have to wait and see. But he's said all the right things so far, and that's really all we can judge him on. If he finds his checkbook in the next couple of weeks, we'll be well pleased.
Cool. All right. I'm going to throw the questions over to Callum now.
Yeah, Dan. I just wanted to ask you about Dimitar Berbatov, really, and what you've made of him this season. Because obviously last year when he first joined you, he really seemed to be our star man, scored 15 goals or so. But this year, I couldn't give you a number, but it seems like he hasn't been anywhere near as prolific. I mean, do you think that? I mean, are you annoyed with his performances this season? Do you feel like his heart's not in it anymore? And do you think his head's been turned? I know we've been linked with him. I mean, do you think he's on his way out? What do you make of his situation at the moment?
I'd hope he's not on his way out, because first of all, he's only got 6 months left on his contract. He signed a 2-year contract when he joined, and you're right, he had an excellent first season and was in the final reckoning probably the reason why we were comfortable enough last season, although we cut it a bit fine in terms of securing our Premier League place for another year. This season he scored 3 goals. He has had some time on the sidelines, and equally we haven't been playing to his strengths. Very rarely did we play with wingers at the start of the season to give him any kind of service, and then you're a little bit surprised that people act surprised that he hasn't been finding the net with any regularity. There's a lot of people say, oh well, he's disinterested, lazy, all these kind of things. I don't really buy that, because he's always been the same type of player. He's never been one to charge after balls after lost causes into the corners and stuff like that. But
he's very languid a player, isn't he? He's a very languid player.
Yeah, and sometimes, Giles, that works to his and our advantage. Because he just surprises centre backs, and I often feel there's an economy of effort with Berbatov. He never puts in more than he needs to, and he'll come alive in the penalty area, and that's really what you want from your centre forward. I don't think the problem's been Berbatov this season. It's a convenient one to cast as a scapegoat when a team's struggling, but I still maintain he's our most likely source of a goal. And actually, he's very good creatively, and all the reports are actually that he's very good with the younger players. So, he may well leave, but I'd like to think it'll be in the summer rather than now, because you're not going to replace somebody of Berbatov's quality in the January transfer window. You can just forget about that.
All right. Okay. So, in terms of incoming players, we've heard that you were linked with Ravel Morrison, and as I said at the start of the show, Stan Allardyce or West Ham are reporting you like the teachers' pets to the FA for trying to effectively tap up Mr. Morrison, young Mr. Morrison. What are your chances of getting someone like Ravel? Apparently he's got a release clause of 18 million, but
something tells me we won't be paying that.
Yeah.
I was surprised at this one because I looked at it and I wondered, you're effectively sort of swapping one relegation-threatened club for another one. Would he be that keen? Apparently he is, and I reckon that's down to Moulenstein, who had a lot to do with his emergence through the youth ranks at Manchester United, as I understand it. I mean, I have to say, West Ham, of all people, reporting a team for transfer irregularities.
Oh, the ironing, as they say.
Well, exactly. I mean, pot and kettle come to mind, really. I find it strange because, we're no stranger to this kind of thing because Liverpool claimed to have signed Clint Dempsey in the summer, and all we got for that was a strongly worded letter of apology from Liverpool. I don't know. He's the kind of player we need because we lack pace and a bit of guile and creativity in central midfield. He's a bit temperamental, but given that you're putting him in a squad with the likes of Turat and Berbatov, I suppose that can go one of two ways, can't it? He'll find some kindred spirits in the dressing room. But you'd have to say that the chances of getting him might be a little slimmer than they were before the press conference last night.
Well, slimmer than Darren Bent and Adel Taarabt look these days, isn't it?
Well, quite, yeah. I mean, that's one of the real problems is, I've not been enamoured with Bent particularly, and he's actually a lot slimmer than he looked in August, if you can believe that. And Taarabt, well, he can be mercurial, he can be brilliant on his day, and he can be maddening most of the rest of the week. So, I wouldn't want to bank on those two guiding us to safety over the next few months.
Okay, cool. You've got Dempsey back in your ranks. He had a great first spell there at the club. So I'm going to hand this over to our American resident panelist, Judd. And right away.
Well, it seems that Fulham's always been very welcoming to American players going back a few years. We've had Marcus Hanneman get his start over in England with you guys, Eddie Lewis, Carlos Bocanegra, Brian McBride, Casey Keller, and probably one of the most successful, Clint Dempsey, and I'm sure you guys were kind of gutted to have lost him to Tottenham a couple of years ago, but now that you've got him back on loan to the end, is it to the end of the year?
It's only, at the moment, only until February, unfortunately.
Oh. Do you think that having him back and included in the squad for a few weeks is going to be able to maybe, tip you guys over the edge and get you a couple more points to get you hopefully closer to safety at the end of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. We hope so. As you say, Clint was fantastic in his first spell at the club. You know, following on from for the most part some very successful American imports. You know, Eddie Lewis didn't quite live up to the American David Beckham tag he was given, which is unfortunate. But most of the others were superb. Dempsey's looked a little off the pace in his 2 games so far, particularly on Saturday against Sunderland. But that's understandable because of the differences in the season, and now that he's gone back to the MLS. But he had a terrific goal scoring return in his last season with Fulham. He scored 23 goals from midfield. And we're hoping for more of the same. And left midfield is an area where we've been a little bit weak, and that's where he's likely to play. So hopefully he can get up to speed and fire in a few goals. That'd be terrific, and it would be a wonderful way to cap a fine Fulham career. We just need to keep him away from the penalties because he missed a few of those. So yeah, as long as he's not doing that, we'll be quite happy.
Well, you guys seem to have always had an eye for American talent. And then my other question is, I'm kind of trying to figure out for myself who the next American star is going to be, and I was wondering if maybe you could provide some insight into that, because I'm struggling to see anybody right now.
Oh, I don't know. Actually, I mean, in terms of the young American talent, we've got a couple actually on our books in the youth team. There's a young lad called Emerson Hindman who, every time I've seen him, he's been excellent. Played as a winger and now actually playing in central midfield. He looks terrific. He's tiny, but he's a wonderful player, wonderful ball player. So we're really excited by him. But I think actually the story now is that there's an awful lot of Americans who would look very comfortable playing in English football and around Europe. You know, we were very close apparently to signing Michael Bradley before he went to Toronto last week, and I think that's the story really, is that we in some small way might have been able to give Americans a real path to Premier League prosperity. You know, somebody like Brian McBride, for example, who remains one of my favourite Fulham players, just for the sheer effort he put in, more than anything else. You know, typified that grit and determination that you really need.
Cool. Any other questions, Joe?
Well, I don't mean to step on your toes, Giles, but coming into the weekend, what are your expectations?
My expectations aren't especially good, as we've never won at Arsenal. We had a couple of sort of doughty draws. I remember a draw at Highbury when Edwin van der Sar and the frame of the goal seemed to play starring roles as we held out against Arsenal. And in more recent years, we've had a couple of really good performances at the Emirates. But I think we might need to reprise the Alamo to get something out of this game on Saturday. Just looking for a little bit more solidity in defence and some sensible play in midfield as opposed to what we've had. And it's obviously very daunting because I think Arsenal are in a really rich vein of form at the moment, playing some wonderful football. And as I was saying to you guys earlier, I'd have you as right up there to win the league. And when you're looking at it from our point of view, that's going to be really difficult. You know, we were talking about it in the pub after the game last night. If we kept it down to 2, that would be pretty good considering our recent record of shipping goals. But you've got to be a little bit more ambitious than that. I reckon Moulenstein will set us up with one up front, try and flood the midfield and see whether we can hit Arsenal on the break. I think that has to be the way to play, really.
I'm just looking at your run of fixtures. I mean, after us, you've got the FA Cup game against Sheffield United next weekend, and then I think Monday, is it? You've got a relegate. Well, you've got Swansea away, followed by Southampton at home. 3 days after that, and you've got an 8-day break. You've got Man United away, Liverpool at home, West Brom. So spring's going to be as Ferguson used to say, kind of like a itchy bum time or squeaky bum time for you guys. I mean,
itchy bum.
Itchy. I'm going to coin that one.
Yeah, obviously it's going to be very, very important. You'd like to think that we could get something from Swansea and West Brom. And that's really important. Obviously, then Liverpool at home is a difficult game. We don't have a bad record against Liverpool at home lately, and obviously everybody wins at Old Trafford this season. So we'll be looking forward to that. Yeah, I think it's just about building up momentum, and it's still so tight down there that a couple of wins, even if they're not consecutive wins, a couple of wins can sort of dig you out of real trouble. And I don't think you're looking at sort of 45 points, 42 points to be safe this season. I think there'll be a lot of teams scrapping on a lot less than that come the final weeks. So it's just a question of putting ourselves in the best position possible, because if you look a little bit further, the sort of April to May period is actually quite kind for us. It's worked out quite nicely. But obviously we'd like to be winding down a little bit then, rather than having to win those games. But our start to the season might make that scenario a little bit impossible.
So do you think that this year it could be back to around, I think it was like 2009, 2010, where, mid-30s would be enough to keep you guys in the league for next year?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit I've sat there already with the predictor and started playing with it because, it is getting quite nerve-wracking, itchy bum time, whatever you call it. I haven't quite had that sensation yet, but I'm sure it will come.
Yeah, it's been a few years. The last few years you've had to, collect a lot more points than that to stay up. But
but I think it's a poor Premier League this season. Certainly at the other end of the table to where you guys are, there are some desperately poor teams, and we're one of them. Unfortunately, but you're in that sort of scenario where you're looking at the bottom five and you're thinking, well, on paper, are we better than them? I'd like to think so. And then there's always a team that sort of drops like a stone to end up in there. So, it'd be lovely to get 40, 42 points, Judd. I'd be delighted with that, but, that's going to require some sort of Champions League qualification for the remainder of the season. So, as good as we have been, I don't think that's quite going to happen.
All right, Callum, got any questions?
Yeah, this is for the weekend's game and really to the end of the season as well. But, who do you see, we spoke about Berbatov, but who else do you see as being the kind of guys that you'd fancy to step it up and potentially even hurt us? But beyond that, if you do survive and you look back in May, who do you think will be the guys that have kind of pulled you through it, or provided a bit of quality that can get you out of this trouble, aside from Berbatov, really?
I think there've been a couple of really eye-catching sort of arrivals into the team. Not necessarily somebody who hurts you, but somebody who's given us a lot more belief in midfield, a bit of drive and determination, and no mean skill actually, considering that most people seem to think he invented crop circles with his pirouetting on the pitch. It's Scott Parker. Obviously I don't want to swear on this podcast by mentioning his previous employers.
Don't bring the tone down, please.
But he's been excellent since he's come in. And actually, one of my nominees for Player of the Season, although there aren't too many contenders for that award, is a young lad called Paitim Kasami, who's come in and been excellent.
He scored that goal against Palace, did he not?
That wonder goal, didn't he? A couple of days after we scored a few wonder goals.
I fear that might be, one of the few nights when you're really able to wonder what on earth happened there in a good sense.
That was with his weaker foot as well, was it not?
I know, it's incredible.
Left-footed. It's amazing, that goal.
It was. I don't think he could do it again if he tried. No. The modesty of the guy is quite remarkable though, because he apparently, when he was doing the interviews, a colleague of mine works for Fulham in the press department, and and she said that he turned round and he'd been asked several times about this goal, and he turned round to the press officer and said, "Well, it wasn't really that good, was it?" And everyone just looked round at him in amazement, because it's the best goal I've ever seen by a Fulham player.
It was the way he just took it into his stride, the way it's a long ball and he's running in a straight line. He just controls it with his chest, and it just set up perfectly for him. But he's still got. It reminded me a bit of Peter Crouch's goal against City. When he shot from right on the edge of the corner of the box right into the opposite corner. It was really something special.
I'd rather go the Van Basten route than Crouch. It just elevates it to a higher place. Thank you, both. You used to play around the corner with me.
And Sidwell scored a screamer in that game as well, did he not?
Sidwell's actually been in fine goal scoring. He's got 6 now.
Former Arsenal youngster.
Absolutely, and he'll be looking forward to coming back to Arsenal on Saturday. And he normally plays pretty well.
What about Kaka Nikolic? Because he was. He scored a header in the 3-3 last season, if I remember correctly.
Right, he came off the bench.
And I've always seen him as one of your kind of brighter prospects. I mean, has he been... But I haven't seen an awful lot of him this season. Has he underperformed, or is he...
He's fitted in and out, and he's had a bit of a, crisis of confidence, I think, a little bit, which is strange, because actually, at international level for Sweden, he's firmly established himself in their side now. Mm. And actually, we had another young winger called Karim Fry, who
Turkish guy, wasn't it?
Left it. That's right. Who went back to Turkey at the start of this season, and that was seen as a massive vote of confidence for Alex. He actually had a really good game last night. And I really like him. He's able to take on the fullback and commit players, and I'd like to see him do really well. But it's a question of whether he can replicate that form. I really hope he can, because he's one with a bright future ahead of him.
Cool, good stuff. Any more questions for this before we move on?
Covers it for me.
No, I think we've covered all bases, really. Go towards the predictions now, isn't it?
I believe we are. So, Dan, you being our special guest for the evening, can you give us your predictions for the game, scoreline and first scorer?
Yeah, I can't see anything other than an Arsenal win here, really, to be honest. I'd say 2-0. And I guess you guys are a bit better placed than I to predict the scorers. Hopefully Senderos doesn't have one in his own net. Really appreciate it.
Be the most useful thing he'd ever did for Arsenal if he did that.
Oh, come on now.
No, he was alright.
Since the Champions League run.
Yeah. No, I always quite liked Senderos. He wasn't as useless as some people made out. But.
Mm-hmm. Cool stuff. Good stuff. Okay, right. So, my bum's getting a bit itchy now, so I'm gonna have to. We're gonna have to wrap it up. Dan, you've been a fantastic guest. As I always say, I wish you and your team all the best for the rest of the season. From 4:45 Saturday evening onwards.
Excellent.
So you've been a great guest, and thanks for coming on. Thank you also to Callum. And
yeah, cheers.
Judd.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. So. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Gooner Ramble and AFTV podcast. On tonight's edition of Behind Enemy Lines, where we get the inside track on Arsenal's next opponents, we'll be talking to an avid Fulham fan, the editor of the Hammy End, and a Labour councillor, Dan Crawford. Still chipper from seeing off Norwich City in the FA Cup last night, and having a bit of a snicker at Fat Sam Adedici, crying about Rennie Williamson instantly chatting about his shopping habits at Morrison's and Ravel's.